Some incredible elections around the world in the past few weeks, earthquakes, they've been called. New parties have reached #1 in some of the most important democracies in the world. And I bet if you watch the CBC as your source of news, and I hope you don't, that you would have missed this news, because these earthquakes, these new parties, are not the parties that the CBC or the consensus media favors. And yet they're #1. Did you know that there were massive elections yesterday in the European Union? That's the mini United Nations across Europe that actually has much more power over its member countries in many ways than their own local governments do. I mean, we know the United Nations is a big waste of money and time, a big talk shop where all the world's dictators sit on human rights councils. It's a big joke, largely harmless, right? Well, the European Union is much more than that. It actually passes laws for its member countries. It has a single currency called the euro. It has a single economic policy, military policy, global warming policy, foreign policy. There are no borders anymore between Eurozone countries. Unemployed people from poor parts of Eastern Europe can stream by the hundreds of thousands into richer countries like the United Kingdom, and there's nothing they can do about it. The European Parliament, there really is such a thing, can actually pass laws that bind its member countries. European judges can pass laws that bind those countries too. It's outrageous, and all the existing normal mainstream official parties love it. Just like all the existing normal media love it. The only thing missing is the people. Well, yesterday they spoke. In the EU elections, anti-EU parties came out huge. In the United Kingdom, the UK Independence Party, UKIP, came in first. Their party symbol is the pound sign, which says it all, doesn't it? Thank God Britain still kept its pound, their currency, instead of joining the disastrous euro. Here, listen to this clip from a speech given by the UKIP's charismatic leader, Nigel Farage, who himself is a European Member of Parliament.
We had the Greek tragedy earlier on this year, and now we have the situation in Ireland. Now, I know that the stupidity and greed of Irish politicians has a lot to do with this. They should never, ever have joined the euro. They suffered with low interest rates, a false boom and a massive bust. But look at your response to them. What they're being told, as their government's collapsing, is that it would be inappropriate for them to have a general election. In fact, Commissioner Wren here said they had to agree their budget first before they'd be allowed to have a general election. Just who the hell do you think you people are? You are very, very dangerous people indeed. Your obsession with creating this Euro state means that you're happy to destroy democracy. You appear to be happy for millions and millions of people to be unemployed and to be poor. Untold millions must suffer so that your Euro dream can continue.
Now, that was a speech 4 years ago. He's only gotten better and funnier. He's got a great sense of humor, and he's tougher, and he's more effective since then, and more popular. He actually won last night. Let me say that again. He beat the Labour Party. He beat the Conservative Party. His little upstart UKIP party came in first in last night's standings. Oh, they hated him, and by they, I mean all the important people. They called him racist, of course. They called him fringe. Even right-wing media did, because they're too beholden to the official Tories in the UK. Here's my favorite right-wing London newspaper called the Daily Mail. Here's what they said. Up to a third of voters across Europe were expected to opt for fringe parties opposed to the very institution of the EU in the European parliamentary elections. Well, hang on there, lads. If the largest number of people hate the European Union, that's sort of the definition of not being fringe, isn't it? I mean, if a party comes in last, it's fringe. If it comes in first, it's not fringe. The official people have become fringe. Don't call UKIP fringe. Unless, as Farage points out, this whole democracy thing is just an old relic that's getting in the way of great progress. By the way, UKIP's win isn't just for European matters. Last week, UKIP won a staggering 161 seats across the UK in their town hall contest. They didn't just steal seats from Conservatives. They took plenty of Labour seats, too. In a way, they're like the old Reform Party of Canada, which had a democratic populism that appealed to underdogs, both left and right-wing. Oh, they called Farage a racist, just like they called Preston Manning racist and Stockwell Day racist, and pretty much anyone they disagree with is called racist. It's usually a good sign when the left or the media calls you a racist, because it means they can't rebut your arguments and you're winning, and we know the media generally doesn't like to call real racists racist, because that would be racist. Check out this excerpt from a great 4-minute online ad from the UKIP. I've selected just a minute or so from it, but you get the flavor. Look.
Since the lads from Eastern Europe are prepared to work for a lot less than anybody else, I've found it a real struggle. It's getting hard to provide for my family.
You're right. EU regulations place a stranglehold on businesses and cost jobs. There are so many rules and regulations, some make no sense whatsoever. It's never been harder to start and run a business as it is today.
Pretty persuasive, pretty compelling, pretty un-racist, pretty common sense. No wonder they did so well. Here's another ad that the UKIP ran too. Open borders. Open borders, sometimes the problem is with poor, low-wage white migrants flooding in from the poorer parts of Europe, taking jobs at a fraction that British men would. That's a double whammy for lower-income people in the UK. Very cheap labor coming in to drive down wages, but also to drive up housing prices for everyone. It's not racist to point that out. It's just a question of economics and sovereignty and deciding who gets to control the UK's borders. But there is an element to it about immigration that doesn't go to racism or economics. It goes to culture and liberal Western values. I'm talking about millions of Muslim immigrants to UK and France and other countries who bring amongst them a certain percentage of people who refuse to assimilate, refuse to adopt or even respect Western liberal values, and in some extreme cases, who want to fight to conquer the West, even through violent means, like the jihad, like this murderer on the streets of London who hacked to death a British war vet.
The only reason we have killed this man today is because Muslims are dying daily by British soldiers. And this British soldier is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. By Allah, we swear by the Almighty Allah, we will never stop fighting you until you leave us alone. So what if we want to live by the Sharia in Muslim lands? Why does that mean you must follow us and chase us and call us extremists and kill us? Rather, you lot are extreme. You are the ones. When you drop a bomb, do you think it picks one person, or rather your bomb wipes out a whole family? This is the reality. By Allah, if I saw your mother today with a buggy, I would help her up the stairs. This is my nature. But we are forced by the Quran in Surah At-Tawbah, through many ayat throughout the Quran, that we must fight them as they fight us. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I apologise that women had to witness this today, but in our lands, our women have to see the same. You people will never be safe. Remove your governments, they don't care about you. Do you think David Cameron is going to get caught in the street? When we start busting our guns, do you think your politicians are going to die? No, it's going to be the average guy like you and your children. So get rid of them. Tell them to bring our troops back so you can all live in peace. Leave our lands and you will live in peace. That's all I have to say. I mean, Allah's peace and blessings be upon Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
He was literally holding the knives covered with the blood of a British vet he just stabbed and hacked to death in the streets of London. Now that guy, Michael Adeboyejo, was actually a convert to radical Islam, recruited by radical imams who had immigrated to the UK. So there really are sovereignty and economic arguments about immigration, but they're also linked to the challenge of massive Islamic immigration. There are, of course, many Muslim immigrants who want so badly to be British, to get the hell away from Sharia law and the power of nutty medieval imams. But there are plenty, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, who want to bring the medieval nuttiness into the UK and into France and into Belgium. In fact, yesterday on Election Day, 2 Jews were murdered outside a Belgian Jewish museum. Police ensured that the names of the suspects were not released during the vote. No point in giving the right wing more reason to fear open, unlimited, radical, unassimilable immigration, eh? Well, it wasn't just the UKIP that won big. In France, Marine Le Pen won a whopping 26% of the vote, double the vote by the governing party, Hollande Socialists. Le Pen and her upstart National Front just doubled the vote of the incumbents. And the centre-right UMP party came in second. In Denmark, the Danish People's Party, also against unlimited Islamic immigration, came in first last night. The same across Europe. Now, you can call them racist or dangerous or stupid or whatever. Fringe, I think, was the favorite word. But when you are the president of France and you only get 14% of the vote, can you really call anyone else in the world fringe? Okay, we've been talking about some of the world's greatest and oldest democracies, UK, France, etc. But what about the world's biggest democracy, India? By far the largest and increasingly important every year. China has become the big economic and political story of the past decade, and fair enough. But in the long term, I think India is likely more important. China has killed itself by aborting hundreds of millions of its own babies. So demographically, it's about to crash. Basically, a bunch of aging baby boomers with no kids coming up to pay their pensions. China's going to get old before they all get rich. Sure, its sheer size ensures it's important, and its military aggression is going to be an important factor for the next 25 years to be sure. But in the very long run, 30, 50 years, I'd bet on India. Because it's a democracy. It speaks English. It has property rights. It has independent courts. It has the rule of law. It has bureaucracy and academies and systems and customs inherited from the UK after 4 centuries of being part of the Commonwealth. That, plus it didn't kill a generation of its own people. I predict India will win the race against China, and that's good news for those who love democracy and the Anglosphere, countries that share our Western liberal democratic beliefs like India. And who won this massive election in India? With the largest victory in 30 years, the first outright majority in 30 years. Why? A startup, a conservative named Narendra Modi, head of the BJP party. They won 282 out of 545 seats, and their coalition allies added even more. They crushed the white liberal in the race, Rahul Gandhi, who thought he could cruise to victory on the strength of his family's name and reputation and history and wealth. I mean, talk about your entitlement mentality. He made Justin Trudeau look self-made and humble by comparison. Gandhi was crushed, the party's vote getting cut in half. Modi isn't just a conservative on economic matters, anti-corruption, pro-markets, pro-modernization. He'll soup up that country's economy quite surely, but he is also a nationalist with a self-respect. Again, it won't shock you to know about issues like Muslim terrorism, which increasingly target India, such as the massacres a few years back in Mumbai, a constant stream of other terror attacks in the country. I've heard Modi being compared to Ariel Sharon, the Israeli prime minister in general. Some mean that as an insult, some mean it as a compliment, but as you can see by this tweet, he certainly intends to be pro-Israel, not just on economic matters, but on military and counterterrorism measures too. Here, let me read it. I spoke to PM Netanyahu. We value our friendship with Israel and will script a golden chapter in the history of India-Israel relations. That's Narendra Modi, the new PM. Look, the world is changing. None of this has to do with Barack Obama directly, but it does in a way indirectly. Obama was all about airy-fairy, dreamy ways that we'd all love each other. There were no problems that couldn't be solved by a speech. And if that didn't work, well, then just give the speech again and again. I mean, Obama won a Nobel Peace Prize just weeks after becoming president. Isn't that how the world should work? Well, it doesn't. In fact, the world has been falling apart since Obama became president. The world is still in a near recession. The world is overgoverned, overregulated, overtaxed, and under-democratized. Unlimited immigration is an economic problem. Unlimited Muslim immigration is a social and security problem. Obama would call you racist if you said that, and the media would too. Well, they tried that on Nigel Farage and Marine Le Pen and Narendra Modi. They told voters that to support these people is proof that you're a racist. Well, hundreds of millions of ordinary people aren't impressed with that name-calling anymore. They've turned to the right, which, come to think of it, is probably another reason why the CBC is under-reporting these stories. Don't you think?